All right, so let's get started. My name is Jen Lunsford. I am a candidate for New York State Assembly in the 135th District that covers the towns of Webster, Penfield, East Rochester, and Perrington. I'm here today with Heather New, who is a family law attorney at Legal Aid. I'm going to give Heather an opportunity to introduce herself in a second, but because this does cover some legal topics and you are talking with two attorneys, I do have to do the disclaimer at the front end, so my apologies for that. But I am a lawyer and Heather is a lawyer, but we are not your lawyers. This is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If you do have questions about your particular situation, please contact an attorney directly. We will be providing you with some phone numbers and resources for you to contact if you are a victim of domestic violence or if you know someone who is. I will also be providing those in a separate social media post after this. So thank you very much for attending today. And again, Heather New.
Hi, everybody. Like Jen said, my name is Heather New. I am a family law attorney at the Legal Aid Society of Rochester. That means I handle exclusively family law issues, divorce, custody, child support, spousal support, and orders of protection issued through family court. And I work primarily with victims and survivors of domestic violence.
So thank you, Heather. And also full disclosure, Heather is my amazing treasurer for my campaign. So I just want people to know that I did pull her in here with ulterior motives. So Heather, can you just start by telling us a little bit about what Legal Aid does?
Yes, so Legal Aid has been around. It's actually our 100th anniversary this year. We provide services to low and moderate income individuals in Rochester, Monroe County, and some of the outlying counties. I'm actually going to hit the services that we're offering right now, because I think there are some that are particularly relevant for the times in which we have found ourselves. The general number for Legal Aid is 585-232-4090, and you can find information specifically about the services that I'm about to discuss at LASROC, LASROC.org/COVID-19. That is the number 19. We have an attorney for the children program. Those are attorneys that are appointed by family court judges to represent children, so under the age of 18, through family court. That's in juvenile delinquent or persons needed supervision cases, that's CPS, abuse and neglect cases, and that's also custody cases, because both the parents have attorneys, so the child should also have an attorney. And it's their job to represent what the child wants, so they're their voice in the courtroom. We have an education law department. They right now are taking consultations if there are issues with distance learning, and also the annual reviews for the Committee on Special Education. So if your child has an IEP, an individual education plan, and I know there's called something different for the younger children, but of course I've forgotten that. It does appear that a number of school districts are proceeding with those virtually. So Legal Aid can provide information or represent you during those annual meetings. Like I said, our family law, we do everything in family court. At this time, we're really focused on all emergency family offense petitions, which is the temporary orders of protection, violation of custody or visitation agreements or orders, as well as any emergency orders to show cause, including failure to pay child support, downward modification of child support, things like that. Our housing and consumer law unit, right now, there are no foreclosures, there are no evictions. There still is an emergency process if landlords are threatening to lock out their tenants. So they are available for that. Also, house closings are still going on right now. So if you're dealing with buying a house, Legal Aid can assist with that. And our immigration law unit, I will say they have a direct phone number, which is 585-295-5750. There are so many pressing issues right now facing undocumented Americans, whether they are in the middle of going through an immigration process or not. So they can answer questions about kind of the COVID response and the effect on immigration status. They can advise individuals in removal proceedings, any immigrant facing a domestic violence situation, individuals seeking asylum, as well as the DACA, our Dreamer renewal applications. So those are kind of the emergent things we're seeing most often right now. But again, 585-232-4090. They will put you in touch. That's our intake. They will put you in touch with attorneys if you have any questions. And also we are doing intakes in preparation, thinking that the courts will open up again, hopefully soon.
Yeah, just to give some people some context who maybe don't know, our courts have closed to everything that's been deemed non-essential, which includes much of what I do for a living, things like personal injury cases, contract disputes, not that I do that, but issues that do not affect the immediate needs of a person. But much of what Heather does in family court is still ongoing. Could you talk very briefly about things that aren't happening, just to give people some context for in what ways the family court is closed?
Things that are not happening, essentially, no new cases are being filed. So if you wanted to file for a divorce right now, you can't. If you have a case that's going on, has been going on prior to the initiation of New York on pause, the judges are slowly ramping up virtual conferences. So it's very likely that if you have an attorney, your attorney will be reaching out to you to let you know the judge wants to talk and wants to try to maybe settle the case. But new cases are not happening. I think one of the biggest things is child support right now. Everything with child support really relies on the date of filing. So if you file for child support for the first time, it's retroactive. So it should start effective the date of the filing. If you have an existing child support order that you're paying, but you want what's called a downward modification, you want to lower it because you're unemployed, because you hours got cut, things like that. Those applications at this time are not being filed. It is something that all the practitioners and all of our judges are working on to try to resolve, but right now there's no great solution. So at this point, there is at least one family court judge on duty every day. Mm-hmm. And they're making the determination along with Judge Doran, who is the presiding judge, kind of the boss of Monroe County and I believe 6 or 7 other counties. And they make the decision as to what is or is not considered essential. But even if something is filed, we're hoping it eventually gets caught back up once the courts open again.
So I think let's start to shift to the topic at hand. You are an attorney who does handle domestic violence issues and who represents clients in domestic violence situations. Given how many people are cooped up in many cases with their abusers, or who are in a situation where abuse is ramping up because of the tensions that we're seeing, are you experiencing an uptick in calls and in inquiries related to those issues?
So we definitely are, and I believe Jen's going to publish these phone numbers after. But my advice is I always recommend Willow Domestic Violence Center as an incredible resource. They are kind of our local, all ages, all sex, all gender, all creeds, colors, ethnicities, one-stop shop for either for their own services or for resources if you're looking for something else. So their phone number is 585-222-SAFE, which is 7233. Interpreters are available. And they also have a text line. This is where we're seeing victims and survivors who are housing with their abusers because there's unfortunately this time nowhere for them to go, really relying on some of these alternative methods. So their text line is 585-348-SAFE, 585-348-7233. And you can also reach out to them via Facebook Messenger. It's facebook.com/Willow Center NY. So we're seeing a lot of victims and survivors reaching out via text or via Facebook Messenger because they're not in a position to have either any phone call or any phone call of length to talk with social workers to kind of do some brainstorming about safety planning and things like that. I would also say that the New York State Domestic and Sexual Violence Hotline is also available. That number is 1-800-942-6906. They also have a chat line, which is available through thehotline.org. And both the New York State line and the Willow line are well trained specifically for these issues. They will communicate with you in a way that ensures your safety. They're not going to kind of put you on blast that they're from a domestic violence center. They have all these steps to ensure a victim and survivor's safety when they are reaching out.
So Heather, if someone is experiencing domestic violence, what do you believe is the best step for them at this point in the scenario that we find ourselves in?
So, I'm a lawyer. You can't ask me what the best approach is.
Yeah. What is approach?
So my advice is almost always to reach out to Willow first. And they do have interpreters available for a plethora of languages, including ASL. So the best approach is always what keeps the victim and survivor safe. Mm-hmm. So if you're worried about escalation, if you call the police or if you go to family court to get an order of protection, those are things that Willow can talk to you about. There's also a wide range of safety planning that you can do and steps you can take that don't require law enforcement or court intervention, but are effective as a way to keep yourself and anyone else in your family safe. If you do end up calling 911, it is your right to receive what's called a domestic incident report from the police officer. It's a few pages. It lists who's involved, what they said, what you said, what the police observed. And by law, they have to provide that to you. It's best that they give that to you in the scene. That's also really good if you do end up going into family court or if there is another incident, so that you do have documentation of that. The Hall of Justice, the court, that's the name of the fancy name of the building, is still open for filing for an order of protection in family court. So you can file for an order of protection in family court. The court is open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We have been told that masks or face coverings are required. If you have your own, that's great. If not, Willow has actually made available some masks for survivors who come into the courthouse. Just let the deputy know. They should offer it to you. But in case there's some miscommunication, you can let the deputy, the police officer, when you first come in, know that you're a victim or survivor and you want a face mask from Willow. The process, so if anyone has ever had the experience of filing for an order of protection, a temporary order of protection, which are also called restraining orders. There's another word, but of course now I can't think of what it is. But in New York, we call them temporary orders of protection.
TPO. You usually might
get done.
Ending as TPO, which
I think you're on mute, Jen.
Oh, obviously. Hang on. You got me? Don't worry about it. You go.
Oh, sorry. No, I muted you because my phone was ringing on my computer. Sorry about that. So the process now is if you go into court, you will be taken to the probation department. Probation writes the family offense petition. That's kind of the piece of paper that you give to the judge to say, this is why I want an order of protection. This is what I need, why I need an order of protection. This is specifically what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. They are now doing those interviews by phone. So you will physically be in the Hall of Justice in the court, but you will be calling probation to draft the petition for you. At this time, there is no universal policy amongst the judges as to whether or not the judge will physically talk to the person applying for the order of protection. So we are really emphasizing that the probation rights actually physically drafts the petition, but everyone has the chance to read it and revise it before you sign it because it is your words. So we are advising people that you make sure as much detail about alleged instances of abuse is in there, and you can ask that probation revise it. You can ask that they add things. Again, I would also say, I think it is a really good idea, particularly now where things are changing with the court pretty regularly, to contact Willow before you do that, or to contact legal aid. So I'm going to give you a different Willow number, and that was also on what Jen shared. Willow has 2 specific court advocates who help write petitions, are in domestic violence court every day, or they were, but now they're virtually there. And those phone numbers are, it's call or text 585-209-0753. And that is someone who speaks both English and Spanish, or 585-209-3051. So I would reach out specifically to those court advocates to talk through the allegations of abuse. They can also, legal aid also has attorneys on call every day through Willow or through our office. So again, that's 232-4090. And we can kind of give you some tips and tricks about what really needs to be put into the petition, because there are some things that you might personally think aren't that big of a deal, or maybe you didn't remember the specific detail, but through talking through an advocate or an attorney, we can kind of flesh some of those things out a little bit more. So once your petition is done and you sign it, it will be submitted to the judge. And then, like I said, we're not sure, it's kind of a case-by-case basis whether or not the judge will actually want you to come into the courtroom and talk to them. At this point, it's just you, it would just be you and the judge. The abuser won't have any notice of it. They won't be there to speak. They won't be on the phone. So at this point, the abuser has no knowledge of what's going on. If the judge grants a temporary order, you will basically wait to see if you're going to get a temporary order. So if an order is granted, you will physically leave with it that day. I would note that this process could be a little lengthy. So if you do come down to the courthouse, allow yourself probably 3 to 4 hours. And I think that might even be a little bit conservative. It might be longer than that, just because we're now dealing with a lot of different channels that we weren't before.
And
if
there
an
are
order is granted,
there are certain masking requirements now at the courthouse. So if you are coming into the courthouse, you need to have a mask. And I believe, Heather, you mentioned that Willow has masks for people if they need them.
yes.
Also, just to give some people some context, that this process is a little bit different than what would be happening under normal circumstances. So if you've done this before and you're now doing it again, it's going to be a little bit different. And as Heather said, you're not going to have an opportunity to orally explain to a judge what's happening, which is why the thing you write is going to have to be more detailed than what you may have done before.
Yes, we have seen that the petitions, the applications are significantly longer than they have been previously, because normally you would get the opportunity to expand on that and the judge to ask questions. But as of right now, that's not something that we're seeing in 100% of cases. Mm-hmm. So if you are granted a temporary order, it does need to be served on the abuser in order to be effective. And service means the papers need to be delivered to them. You have the absolute right to ask the court to serve the abuser. You will need to have a good address, whether it's a home or their employer or their mom's house where they're staying, or their brother's house where they're staying. There just needs to be a good address, because the court will forward that to the police and they will attempt to serve it. You also have the opportunity to serve the abuser, I say yourself, but you will not physically be the one delivering them the paper. You can call 911 and the police will come to you, pick up the paper and serve it. You can use a friend or family member who is 18 or over to serve them the paperwork. But essentially under New York law, the abuser has to have notice of the order of protection in order for it to be effective and enforceable. And what New York law has decided that means is it has to be physically given to them by a person over the age of 18. So whether it's the police or a friend or a family, it just cannot and should not be the victim or survivor themselves.
And Heather, is there an affidavit of service that would come along with that? If, say, I had my brother-in-law serve it, would my brother-in-law need to do an affidavit of service?
Yes, excellent point. So if the court does not serve the direct service of the paperwork, you're given what we colloquially call a service packet, which is basically a copy of the petition you completed, the temporary order of protection, a summons that has the court date on it, and then an affidavit of services, and it's all kind of stapled together. The affidavit of service needs to be completed by the person who did the serving, and it has their name, the name of the person they're serving, some kind of physical characteristics to kind of ensure that this is the right person. You need to say the date and time when you served it, and that needs to be signed, but that also needs to be notarized. Mm-hmm. I know that right now we're dealing with a lockdown situation, but banks, the courthouse itself does notaries. I know there are, now we can do it electronically, so there are some different opportunities. So if that is something that you're having questions about, you can also call Legal Aid or Will about that as well.
Great. What about people with current orders that are in operation right now? Is there anything they need to know?
So if you have a final order of protection, so that means you went to court and it resolved itself, those expire when they're scheduled to expire. If you have a temporary order of protection, which is what you would have if your case has not resolved yet, those will be automatically extended. They were automatically extended for 90 days. But basically what the current order, which is kind of the way that laws have been being passed right now temporarily, there is a New York State law that says all temporary orders of protection will be extended until we get back into court. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of safe if you have temporary orders that were extended through maybe May, but now we're starting to see some of those deadlines start to come up. So technically you will have an extended order. If you have an attorney, reach out to them about serving it. The order will still be effective in terms of family court, but if it is extended and the abuser doesn't receive service of it, there may be some criminal court implications. That's kind of all on the legal, we all have too much time on our hands end of the spectrum, but you will have a valid order of protection until such time as you return back to court, and then we'll deal with that all then. Yeah. But kind of my caveat to that is, when you're talking about an order of protection through family court, your temporary order of protection will last until such time as your case resolves, which means there's a trial with a decision at the end of it, or there's a settlement where both parties come to an agreement as to how the case ends.
And if you're dealing with a situation that has a component in criminal court, or maybe there's a civil, like an intentional tort, an assault or something, statutes of limitations, I think even in criminal matters, have been extended. Basically, right now, we can't file anything. There's like no mechanism by which to bring complaints. So the statutes of limitations in New York have been extended for some time, and we don't really know when they're going to start back up, which makes me very nervous. I think about it all the time. But that means that if something in your domestic violence situation or in your family court case is contingent on some kind of finding in the criminal or the civil court, it's going to continue in this pause for some period of time. I don't know about what you're hearing in family court. What I'm hearing in Supreme Court from some judges is that they are talking internally about trying to move some things along, but they are limited by what the state tells them they're allowed to do.
Yes, that as anyone, I think, as people watching this can see, Jen and I think lawyers writ large, are very uncomfortable with a lot of what's happening right now, because we've been trained and spent decades learning how to read law and abiding by the law, and everything has a very rigid structure to it. And right now, everything is kind of up in the air. And we're not great at dealing with that and with not getting answers to our questions.
Especially things like dispositive deadlines, where if you don't meet them, bad things happen. That makes me very uncomfortable, but
Yes.
we're doing what we can. And it's also why, if this can be a little public service announcement, if you have an attorney and your attorney is not answering your questions to your satisfaction, please be kind to them. They don't have the answers you need because they don't know either. We are doing our best to inform our clients about what we know as it's happening, but I know just in the last week, some things have changed day to day about what we can expect and what is going to happen. So we're really not sure, which is why we're trying to inform people here about what is available to them and what actions they can take maybe outside the court system while the court system sort of ramps itself back up. Law is very slow to begin with. This kind of crisis, it is not built for. Most of these judges are in their 50s and 60s, some of them their 70s. Skype and Zoom is very overwhelming to them. They are adjusting very slowly, but I'm hoping that we're going to see more action from the courts in the next couple weeks. Heather, is there anything you want to talk about in terms of child support arrears, people who owe child support? Especially, I've been hearing that as the stimulus checks are coming, people who have garnishments on their checking accounts or who are paying arrears direct to the county are having their stimulus checks eaten entirely. Do you have any comments or thoughts about what's going on there?
Yeah, so that's unfortunately also another area where things seem to be up in the air, because I know that Attorney General James had indicated she wanted that not to happen, but I also know at the federal level, they have been slower to kind of come to any resolution on that. If that has happened to you where child support that you owed is now kind of been paid off with your stimulus check, first, you'll get a letter from the government indicating that your stimulus check was basically used as payment to pay for the child support, the back child support. It will also say you can call the New York State Child Support Helpline. That's open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And that number is 1-888-208-4485. You can also, if you have questions about your own order or the enforcement of an order, the Monroe County Support Collection Unit, they only respond via email, but their email address is C as in cat, S as in Sam, E-W-E-B as in boy, Monroe at dfa.state.newyork.us. So if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to them. If you are currently married and your spouse has child support arrears, so that took like your kind of whole stimulus check, you can actually seek relief through the IRS. If you just Google IRS injured spouse, it will take you to a form that you can complete. And essentially the IRS will, the end relief is they will send you your portion of the check. So if you're getting $1,200 for a couple, that you would essentially get your half, which would be $600. If you are involved in any type of child support or open divorce or custody, I would reach out to your attorney, because there are situations where parents are no longer living together. So who gets the money for the children is a bit of an issue. Under the law, it should be who is residing with, who the children reside with 51% of the time. Because that goes to who can claim them on their taxes. So reach out to your attorney. I hope a lot of parents are realizing the money should go to the kids, so they're not fighting over it. Although we're both lawyers, so we're well aware that is not always the situation. And if anything like that happens too, so again, you can reach out to legal aid, 232-4090. But also kind of document everything too, because even though the courts are not, we don't have our doors wide open right now, we will in the future. So this is something that you might be able to seek relief for down the road, because we are talking about pretty substantial sums of money.
Yeah. And again, this is not legal advice, and nothing I am saying should be construed as legal advice. Anything you need to know about your own situation, you should contact an attorney directly about. What I am hearing is that if there are issues with support not being paid to the county, they just are not open and functional enough to do enforcement on that right now for people who are unemployed. But you should contact them directly if you're having problems making payments. And this is true of anything. If you're having problems making payments for any reason, please contact the people to whom you owe money and talk to them about it before you miss a payment so that you can take whatever steps are necessary. And I always recommend, especially in cases like bankruptcy or child support arrears, if you can pay something, please do. If you can pay $5 into it, please do. Just keep making some kind of payment so you can point to it and say, I lost my job. There's some sort of, a crisis situation that is preventing my ability to pay. I'm trying. You do still owe that money, and there is no change in the law. There's no executive order. There is no relief offered to you saying that you do not owe your child support arrears. But due to just the pause, there are some employees that are just not available. So people who need that support are having issues, and people who owe that support are having issues. We need to try to work together because there has been no official word on what sort of relief to give people in the situation. And it's a bad situation to be in, because the parents who are owed the money have a great need for it, as do the parents who owe it, and people have lost jobs left and right. So it's an all hands on deck situation, I think, as everything in law has been. But again, not legal advice, and I don't actually know any of those things. That is just what I am hearing.
And this is more kind of anecdotal, if you are contacting people to whom you owe money, companies to whom you owe money, if you do a call, which I think again is a very good idea, I would specifically mention COVID-19 or the coronavirus. A lot of people who work at those companies are saying there is specific relief that they can give you if the kind of magic words are used, which is, because of coronavirus, I lost my job, my hours have been cut, whatever the effect is. So if you're reaching out to companies or to businesses, I would recommend kind of dropping that as well.
And of course, that's a very broad term, because if you've lost hours because your business cannot be open as long, if you have been furloughed because business is down, those are all related to COVID-19. It doesn't have to be I am infected or someone I know is infected. In fact, if you go back to my unemployment video from last week, I provide a big long list of things that qualify for unemployment as a COVID-19 relief under the PUA program. And that would be, I think, the kind of keywords to use in this situation. I am going to give people a few minutes to give us some questions if they have them in the YouTube chat. Heather, is there anything else you wanted to discuss while we're here?
Yes. So, one point that I forgot to mention earlier, if you cannot physically, if you want or need to file for an order of protection and you cannot get to court, again, I would also reach out to Willow. They have resources available to either help with transportation to get to court or to kind of brainstorm some other options. And then the other point I wanted to raise was kind of the opposite of our custody discussion or our support discussion. When it comes to child custody and visitation, parenting rights, if you have an order through court or you're in court right now and the judge said this is what you need to do, that is what you need to do. We actually got the first case out of Kings County, which is downstate, but it's the first case specifically addressing visitation during times of the coronavirus. And it tracks with what our Monroe County judges have been telling us, which is unless the other parent or someone in their household has tested positive for coronavirus or is displaying symptoms of coronavirus, you need to follow the custody order as it is. The fact that you may not have complete confidence that the other parent isn't following perfect CDC guidelines, or you're worried if they're an essential worker. The courts really aren't considering that good enough reason to modify visitation or parenting time. Another thing that is sufficient is if the other parent says they're traveling to a hotspot area. So like a month ago, if a parent said they were taking the kids to New York City, that was obviously a big deal. So just try to follow the order as best as you can. Also try to communicate with the other parent, FaceTime, Zoom. These are all things that are available for the child to interact with the other parent. So I know sometimes it's difficult. There's obviously a reason that, parents are no longer together, but this is really a time where everyone is we're uncomfortable all the time. We're all in trauma all the time. So trying to communicate in an effective and safe way with the other parent about the child and your child's health and safety is really important.
Okay. I am not seeing any questions on the YouTube chat. So I think we can wrap it up now, unless there's anything else you wanted to add.
Call Willow? No.
I will be providing those phone numbers.
It's that.
Yeah. Willow is an amazing organization, and if you are looking for organizations to support during this time, Willow is an outstanding organization. They provide essential work to our community in the best of circumstances, and they are doing absolutely critical work right now. So I will provide some links as well in the social media posts that follow this. As always, a captioned version of this video will be up in several hours. We have to kind of wait for YouTube to catch up. But thank you to everyone who viewed us live today, who's viewing us afterwards. If you do have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me at jen@votejenlunsford.com. If I can't answer your question, I can certainly point you to someone who can. Consider Legal Aid and Willow for all of the amazing resources they provide to us as a community. And as always, stay safe and stay strong. Thank you so much. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, everybody.